Hello and welcome to Macro Mondays powered by the Gokhstein News Network. I am your host Landy and today is December 1st, 2025 and we're looking at Bitcoin here on the monthly chart because we do have a new monthly close, of course. And of course, we have monthly closes across all major markets. And look, Bitcoin doesn't look great here, but there is still a chance for the bulls. And why is that? That is because we're in a macro compression on both the monthly and the quarterly. And look, this is something that I've been talking about for quite some time. Quarterly does look like it wants to put in the first closing high, though, since the bull market began. So there are some concerning things here, but we will lay out some of the conditions that I'm looking for coming into the end of the year as we approach the end of the year. But I did want to kind of call out some of the levels here on the bands as it relates to where price is trading. And one of the key levels is a weekly level where we see an inflection point for a swing high and a swing low. That is, well, a swing higher low and a swing lower high. And that happens to be something I'll show in a minute that we've talked about quite a bit on the weekly time frame, but that is at $89,000. That is now where the monthly basis band is coming in. Now, this is a 20 simple moving average. Bitcoin is trading below it right now and just barely hanging on to a weekly at $86,000. But, a little bit of wick fishing, might be in order for the monthly time frame here. One of the biggest things to pay attention to is that we just confirmed a bearish divergence on the monthly. I'll show that in just a moment here, but we've hit the initial bearish divergence targets to the downside before even actually printing the bearish divergence. But the additional downside is possible from here. With Bitcoin trading below $89,000, the prior month's low, that would be the November low. It's around $80,000 or almost, I think it's exactly $80,000 on Coinbase. Here on the index, it's coming in just slightly above $80,000, but also on a major weekly level. That is in play as long as Bitcoin is trading below $89,000. Now, keep in mind the context. We're talking about the monthly here. So while the daily is closing above 86 and might have some potential for maybe a trend break or a reversal setup, that is not what I'm talking about when looking at the monthly. As long as Bitcoin is trading below $89,000 of the basis on the monthly, we're playing in the volatility zone of interest between the basis and the lower first. Where is the lower first? It's about $70,000 to $70,500. Now, of course, that puts Bitcoin in retest territory of this high over here. Now, we did not get a direct retest of the high side structure. And this, of course, was the 73,835 on spot. Here it's 73,757 for index. But this is a key area, right? Right around that $73,000, $74,000. We didn't quite hit it on the April move down on that swing structure. And that is the next major area to pay attention to, is kind of like 73 to 75 down by that lower first. You can even rope in $69,000 to 65 on the swings here as well, because this falls on some major weekly levels down here inside of this downtrending structure, which is a swing downtrend. But in the context of the monthly, this was a drawdown that did not put in any kind of a structure break. In fact, it was a higher high to a higher low. On a swing basis, it was, we had a little bit of a swing structure here that was downtrending, but that was more on the weekly. In the context of the macro structure here on the monthly, this was just another higher low to a higher high, a higher low, and a higher high. And what is in danger right now? Well, we've already swung the 82.5 monthly close higher low in this case. So the next area of interest would be to go and try and run that higher low swing at the 74.4 area to 74.450, 500 or so. Now, if Bitcoin does dig in there on the daily, well, the next logical areas are going to be around that $70,000 to 69 over here is fair game, even 65. And then we have to start entertaining moves back to, around the 61.5, 61.3 to 58.8 area. But the bulls, if they show some signs of life here and start to possibly change the daily trend, we'll look at the weekly, and there is opportunity there still left for the bulls, but it's getting close. It's getting very, very close in terms of structure. Now, I did mention one of the things to pay attention to, even if we do get a structure break, and this is mainly because we haven't seen true minor capitulation, and Bitcoin has the halving cycle, but there's also the minor capitulation cycle, which is the post-halving minor capitulation cycle. So technically there's two cycles. There's the emission cycle, and then there's the minor cycle. And we have not seen a true minor capitulation yet post-halving. And of course, we know that this was pre-halving, and we haven't seen any post-halving minor capitulation, even on this drawdown. That was not true minor capitulation. But one of the things to pay attention to, if we do get a deviation below the monthly swing higher low here, because we've already gotten the swing below the close at 82.5, would be something like this that then makes a new high. That is a real possibility. Now, how long that takes and what it looks like in terms of structure, remains to be seen. If that were something to play out, that would be the best case scenario for bulls. And the only reason that I would even entertain anything like that, whether it happens here, which we're not in minor capitulation, we've seen some capitulation, but not a true full minor capitulation, where even some of the most profitable machines are most profitable. The most profitable are going to be the most efficient, but where the most efficient machines are actually underwater or close to cost basis for electrical cost, we haven't seen that. And we haven't even got close to it, to be quite honest. And if we were to see a deeper move, we would start to see that, in my opinion, we would start to see that below 74, which would be this swing higher low on the monthly. And that's actually where things would get very interesting. Not only is that the swing higher low on the monthly, but of course everybody's going to talk about Saylor's average cost for strategy. And honestly, it's not a big deal. He doesn't have to sell Bitcoin. And in fact, just did issuance of shares, common stock shares, and raised, was it 1.41 or 1.14 billion in cash? So they've got plenty of cash, so they can cover their debt obligations, and it's not really that big of a deal. I know a lot of people are making it a big deal, but it's really not. You can't shake the guy, and especially after that cash raise, which people are very critical of, but realistically just gives him tons of runway for something like 16 to 18 months or something like that. I have to go double check, but just kind of off the top of my head from what I remember reading and watching earlier today. But in this case, I'm looking at minor capitulation. Why am I even bringing it up? Well, if it's a structure break, it's a bear market. That's what we've seen. A red yearly, the quarterly's in. If the quarterly paints a high, then it's definitely bear market every time we get a quarterly high. Look, I'll be quite honest with you. The reason that minor capitulation would be so important is to watch isn't necessarily because it would have a bullish outcome, but in every post-halving minor capitulation, once we've seen that minor capitulation come in, we've always seen a brand new all-time high. And in this case, could it still make like a new all-time high and then swing right back down and put in like a lower high in the monthly? Sure. Could it make a new all-time high and then march and actually get expansion? That's also possible. Could we also be looking at something where we are seeing how things have been evolving, get a deviation down, and then a lower high that then breaks down further? That is also probably from a technical analysis point of view, far more likely, actually. But we can't rule out a deviation, trend break on a longer term time frame that leads to a new high. If we do see a capitulation, the only way that I'm seeing that now is it would only just start below around this low at 74.4 area. Realistically, there's still runway there all the way to, 58.8 or so, and even the mid 50s for some of the most efficient miners. But we would definitely start to see network difficulty adjustments accelerate, and then likely see some tailwinds. So that's where the monthly is right now. It's not pretty. And we'll see kind of what the weekly looks like, right? How did the weekly close? Well, the weekly closed below lower second standard deviation, getting the continuation of expansion to the downside. So let's go ahead to the actual spot chart here, which I actually prefer. Why? Because all the big players are using Coinbase, right? All the APs are using Coinbase. Now, whether that's for actual institutional flows or custody, realistically, it's painting one of the cleanest charts. You'll see that when I pull the Coinbase chart here and then look at this low, it's right at, is this the Coinbase chart? Right at around $80,000. I thought we hit $80,000 even, to be quite honest. And I guess not. Did we not? I thought it was 80,000 even on the weekly. Maybe it just hit the weekly and I'm calling it 80,000. That might be actually what it is. 80,500. Let's go ahead and pull up the actual chart here. I could swear it was $80,000 on the dot. I guess it's $80,000 is kind of what I've been talking about. And it's 80,699. And we got it right there on that daily candle. Now, let's actually talk about the weekly before we move to the daily. This is still expansion to the downside on the weekly. You see that, we did go wick fishing after CME opened on Sunday into Monday, down to a sweep down below the prior week's low, but did pop back up at least on the daily to close back above $86,000. Now, as long as Bitcoin's living below the lower second here, which is coming in right around 87.6 or so, and especially below $89,000, which is the swing higher low and swing lower high inflection point between the weekly higher low close and the lower high close. So we have the swing structure right in here that is acting as an inflection point inside of this wider weekly zone, with the downside being around 86 and the top side being around 93.5. Now, if we do see Bitcoin continue to live in the bottom side of this weekly range, it's more likely going to test down. And from the weekly standpoint, we can see that $80,000, especially if we go below around 83.8, 84 on the daily again, very highly likely going to go for that monthly that I was talking about at 82.5. It's not marked on the chart. It's just something that I'm talking about, as it may act as an inflection point in between, kind of no man's land between 86 and around $80,000, which is this weekly close open that did actually close a lower low here, but turned around, put in that swing high right at around $89,000 where this swing higher low is. We got that swing lower high, put in a lower high and a close, and then went down and actually swung into test and get front run above that 74,835 here on spot, which was the prior highs over here, right? And realistically, on the weekly, if we start to drop 86 again, look to 84.85. If we drop that, likely down to the monthly at 82.5, but realistically down to 80 to swing here. And we now see that the lower third standard deviation is inside of this weekly area between around 80,000 and 74,420.69. I'll say it every time here on spot price. That is the only meme that Bitcoin likes outside of dog. Now, if we did see, the low get swept, pay very close attention to the top side of this area between 78 and 80. If 78 is dropped, and then the mid 70s are absolutely in the cards, right? And even lower, down to that lower first standard deviation around $69,000 to $70,000. Of course, 69 being the prior cycle high. But you could also look at this as, if we see this swung below and dip into this area 78 to 80 and then get bought back up and start to recover, especially back above 86, that's a good sweep of the lows that could lead to trying to fill out this weekly zone. And realistically, back above 89, we're looking right back to 93.5. We did see this area tested right below there. Got a front run of 93.5 at the weekly structure here. This higher low close. If we did see that break, while there is daily levels of interest, it's the next weekly that is the biggest kind of game changer, and that's where the weekly lower first standard deviation is, right around 98 to 101. This absolutely needs to be reclaimed, not just tested, because if Bitcoin does start closing above 93.5 and work its way up to 98 to 101, this is going to be an area that's very highly likely going to be met with a rejection, right? This is where we have a weekly higher low structure. This is also where, after testing a major fib level at the 1272 from the prior cycle, high to low, that being $69,000 to $15,500 in 2022, the extension coming in right there at the 103,650 area where we did get a test. Well, we tested down into it. We bounced back up and tested 107, 108 at 107.5, and then nuked right through it all the way down to the next weekly here at that 93.5. So just be aware that if we did start to see dailies moving into weeklies heading back up to 98, 101, be aware of daily rejections. And then it's all about, what does daily structure look like from there, and where can it hold up if it does get rejected there. If it gets above, well, there's a ton of weekly resistance. There's the 102.5 to 103,650 area, which is a weekly, right? That's the weekly close open right here to a major fib level. And then above there, inside of a much wider weekly structure between 102.5 and 112, we have the 107 to 108 weekly level in there. And really, bulls are in a bad position below 112 on closes. And we would need to see weekly closes above 112. And then there's still overhead resistance, 116 to 118. There's 120 right around here, 119.5 to 120. Before even trying for the all-time high zone, 123 to 125. So just be aware of where the levels are. And now we can talk about the daily real quick, and then we'll look forward to the Wednesday check-in, right? Hopefully we'll see some progress here. Now, I did float this high on Friday as being a possible lower high. This is a strong downtrend, right? And the last lower high prior was at 107.5. Very highly unlikely we were going to see Bitcoin go all the way up there and take that out. But now we do have a more local lower high that the bulls can try to break to get a downtrend break. Now, there's a few scenarios to look for. And that is going to be something, and this is just an example, like I was showing on Friday, a lower high to a potential higher low. If we lock in a higher low, this would be a trend reversal setup, and we look for a trend break above 93.5, or I would want to see it above 93.5, to be quite honest. And that's where, let's say this was a higher low. I'm not saying it's going to be, but let's say that this was the higher low right here at 83.8, 84,000, right? Then that would be your trend reversal setup to a trend break. And we'd probably be looking right back to, yes, there is a daily area of interest around 96,000, which is a point of control, or the most volume traded for this area up here. But realistically, we'd be looking back to where? The upper second, upper third, which is right around that major weekly. Again, $98,000 is where the weekly upper first is. And that's also where the daily upper second is. And this would likely result in a rejection. Upper third on the top side there, just above 101. Big weekly zone between 98 and 101. And bulls absolutely need to recover and hold above there to have a chance at this wider weekly zone up here. Now, the other scenario for this would be something like this. Let's say that this wants to come a bit deeper and put in a higher low, equal low structure as it relates to this swing low at around 80,000 to 80,500. That's fair game too, and then try for a trend break. The other scenario that could be bullish, so I'll give you a few, would be dipping in here at that 78 or even lower, and then closing back above without closing below that 80,000, 80,500 weekly level, but instead swinging below it to sweep the low, come in, grab some liquidity, and then put in a lower low, but then try for a trend break above this weekly here at 93.5. Right, that would be your bullish scenarios to look out for. 3, like if this is going to be the low, go for the trend break. If we have a higher low, equal low, and then go for the trend break, or a lower low swing, but close above this last swing low. Well, it would still be a lower low, and more probably be a lower low, but then try for the trend break. Those would be your bullish scenario reversal setups, either from here, a little bit lower, higher low, equal low, or a lower low, but close above this swing low over here by that weekly at 80,500, 600 area. That would be your bullish setups. Those would all be trend reversal setups to trend breaks as possibilities. Otherwise, we're just looking at lower low continuation, right? That would be your lower low continuation, which could be, stopping point around 78 or lower. And that would just be trend continuation after getting a big expansion down and then getting compression again, as we had some nice volatility increase to the downside, mean reversion, volatility cools down, we get a squeeze in the bands, and then you get the next setup for the next leg lower, or a possible trend reversal setup, which is going to be tough. It'll take some time if the bulls are going to go for it. So let's take a look at this squeeze on the bands for the daily real quick. Look, lower second, when you're moving from expansion into a compression again, which we see in the bands pinching back together here. Top side of the bands typically act as areas of resistance. Bottom side typically acts as areas of support, thus giving us right around 82, 82.5 by the lower second. Drop it. We're gonna test down to the low at 80,000 to that 78. If we start closing below there, we're gonna get expansion down to the next bigger areas of interest, right? To the top side, if we get above 93.5, look to that weekly up there as a possibility, or a distinct possibility, around 98 to 101, and not until we saw closes above 101. And even closes in 98 wouldn't really do it for me. We would need to see closes above 101 to get expansion further up into the weeklies up here. So I hope that all makes sense and is very clear. The setup is very clear for what the bulls would want to hunt for in terms of higher low, equal low, or a sweep of the low. And the bearish setup is very clear for continuation on closes below 80,000 and dipping into this zone down here. Now, when it comes to minor capitulation, we're not there. We're not even close. You can even see that right now the projection is an increase in difficulty for miners, as the 1 zettahash or 1,000 terahash is 1,000 exahash has been holding steady for the network here. We've had a really nice recovery on the daily coming into these zones. Today it ticked down as Bitcoin traded below 86. I've said this continuously, below $86,000. We will see marginal minor capitulation. So the least efficient machines will be flipped off until price recovers and holds above 86. And this is where below 74, we would likely see this really dump off and really get rolling over. We haven't quite seen that yet. I know the monthly has had a big correction down late November. Hash rate has recovered really well though. miners got the difficulty adjustments down. We're 2 difficulty adjustments in. And this is, we're seeing now, 1 difficulty adjustment, 2 since the highs. And keep in mind that, we had, it lags. So, hash rate dipping down again, probably going to favor another difficulty adjustment. What that does is that gives miners more room for price to head down while still remaining in profit. And it's a double-edged sword, right? So definitely pay attention to where price is. Price will lead this. And I wouldn't be looking for a real minor capitulation to even get rolling anywhere above 74. So that is what I got for you today. I hope that I've made things pretty clear. I will update you throughout the rest of today and tomorrow in regards to kind of where price is in relation to these levels that I've talked about, and see kind of how things might start shaping up as we head into the Wednesday session, which, by the way, this Wednesday is not FOMC. It is next Wednesday, the 10th, which is also going to fall on the next epoch for Bitcoin's miner, and a possible difficulty adjustment either up or down. So as it gets closer to the 10th, I'll update you on what the projections are, but we won't really know until we get in towards the 10th, like 9th, 10th time frame, which also is going to be rate decisions for FOMC. But not much happening in that regard this week in terms of FOMC and epochs. Just watch price action. All right. I hope you all had a wonderful weekend. I hope you all have a wonderful start to your month and a wonderful morning, afternoon, and evening, no matter where you are in the world. Please trade safe. And of course, as always, stay safe. With all of that being said, Landy out. Take care. I'll see you on the charts.